Amy from the blog of blossominglife.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make the most delicious sourdough blueberry sweet rolls. This is like my take on cinnamon roll, but instead of cinnamon, we're going to do a delicious blueberry jam filling that is sweetened with brown sugar, and then we're going to roll it up in a tangy, soft, and buttery sourdough dough. So let's get started making it. I actually started this last night. I like to ferment all my grains for about 24 hours for the best digestion. This is actually what our family can tolerate, and so usually I do it for 24 hours, but you could do it as little as 8 hours. It probably would even work if you were to mix it up and bake it right away. Yesterday I started the dough, and I started by mixing together 2 cups of flour, and then I'm gonna add a half a cup of water, a half a cup of sourdough starter. So it's gonna be active sourdough starter. This is gonna be sourdough starter that has been fed within 4 to 12 hours of using it, and it's nice and bubbly. 2 tablespoons of honey, and a 1/4 cup of melted butter. Then you just mix it up, cover it up with beeswax wrap or a tight fitting lid or even some saran wrap. Cover it and let it ferment overnight, or at least 8 to 12 hours. Then the next day, it turns into this nice dough. It's actually quite stiff. And then we're gonna add the last ingredients. So you're gonna need 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and a half a teaspoon of salt. And then we're just gonna sprinkle it on. And then we're just going to fold it in really well. Because you wanna make sure it's really well incorporated. We don't want any chunks of anything anywhere. So once that is done, you get a beautiful dough that looks like this. And you'll notice it'll start to rise pretty rapidly from the leaveners mixing with the sour yeast. All right, and then we're just gonna put it over here. Okay, next I'm going to get a nice clean surface. You can use it on your countertop. I like to do it on a cutting board. And then I'm gonna flour my surface well. And here's a little trick for you. So like I said, we can only tolerate long fermented wheat products. And so what I use usually to flour my surfaces is a gluten-free 1-to-1 flour. So that way we're not getting any unfermented glutinous grains, but you could use any flour, all-purpose, einkorn. And then I'm just going to get that flour coated nicely. You don't use too much. And then we're gonna roll it out. And you're gonna roll it, and we're gonna roll it into a nice triangle. And we're gonna roll it out to a nice large rectangle. Square it up on the edges to make it into a rectangle. And you're gonna want it about 1/4 inch thick. You're gonna want it thick enough that it doesn't split apart when you add your filling and roll it up. So before I even started the leaveners in my dough, I actually started my blueberry sauce, and I added 2 tablespoons of butter with about 1.5 cups of fresh blueberries. Frozen would probably work too. I have tons of fresh ones right now because we just picked about 68 pounds of blueberries this year, and so right now we have a lot of fresh. And so I have some fresh blueberries in here, about 1.5 cups with 2 tablespoons of butter, and I kind of heated it up and then smashed it a little bit with my spoon, a few of the pieces, and then added, once it was like nice and bubbly, I added 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, and I always choose the organic cornstarch, and then let it thicken and set it aside to cool. Okay, so to my filling, I'm going to add about 1/3 cup of lightly packed brown sugar. You don't want to push it too hard. So we're gonna add that, and we're gonna stir it up. And if you wanted to, if you want to make these blueberry cinnamon rolls, you could add a couple teaspoons of cinnamon. Break up any clumps. Okay, and then I'm gonna spread my delicious jam onto my dough. So you're gonna wanna leave about 1/2 inch space around the entire perimeter to give it a little bit of wiggle room. Good. Okay. So then I'm gonna start rolling it, and you wanna try to roll it as tight as you can. Make sure it's nice and loose. Okay, I'm gonna start rolling this way, I think. And we're just gonna tightly roll it. Trying to keep all that jam in there. And it is a little messy, so the best part of this recipe is it looks pretty rustic and it's delicious no matter how it looks. It's the key to my recipes. And then once we get towards the end here, you just kind of want to pull it up and tuck it, and then kind of pinch it together a little bit, trying to keep that jam in there. All right, so then we are going to cut it, and there's a couple ways you can do this. You can just use your knife, which is usually what I do. You can use a bench scraper, or you can use unflavored dental floss, or even thread. We're gonna try to cut it into 8 to 10 rolls. To grab my baking dish here, and I have it greased with a little bit of butter. All right, so once you have it sliced into about 8 to 10 even-sized rolls, then you're gonna put them into a greased baking dish. And I promise you, it's super messy, totally fine. They'll still be really yummy. And if you do have some extra blueberries, a little bit of the extra sauce, you can kind of put it in there. If anything looks like it's kind of lacking a little sauce, stick it in there. So once these have been completely put into a baking dish, we are gonna stick them into a preheated oven at 375 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes until the edges start to kind of turn a little bit golden brown. And then we're gonna let them cool for a little bit and then ice them with a delicious icing. All right, my blueberry sourdough sweet buns are out of the oven, and now I want to make a little glaze for them. And I don't usually really measure this because I like to live on the edge. But I'm going to put a little bit of milk, about a half a tablespoon of milk. You could also use water. And then I'm going to start with a half a tablespoon. And then I'm going to add about a quarter of a cup to a half a cup of powdered sugar. Now, I will definitely say this is definitely a luxurious treat that we don't have very often. A teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'm gonna mix it up. And if you need to add a little bit more powdered sugar, go ahead. I usually just like add stuff until it's the right consistency. Okay. Perfect for drizzling, look at that. So I'm just gonna drizzle my icing on. And it's ready to serve. It smells so good. All right, I'm gonna serve myself a piece. How good that looks. Fluffy sourdough roll with blueberry filling. So good. Really hope you enjoy this tutorial on how to make sourdough blueberry rolls that are sweet and delicious and covered with yummy icing. They're the perfect weekend treat. My family just loves them. If you are new to sourdough, check out my video on how to make a quick and easy sourdough starter in 2 days. It's kind of like the cheater's version. In the description box below, I will share all the ingredients and where to find them. Also, there will be a link to the blog post that will show you exactly how to make it and have a printable recipe card on it. Thanks so much for stopping by. I share at least one new video every single week on simple recipes, DIY projects, and natural living products. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hope you enjoy this recipe.